Hello, my name is Dave Savalane, and I am part of the Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division here at the Federal Communications Commission. Before you watch this event, I wanted to let you know that informational videos supplied by each of the organizations in this event can be found at the end of this video. I encourage you to check those out and hope you enjoy this event. Thank you. My name is Dave Savalane, and I am from the Consumer Affairs and Outreach Division of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at the FCC. First things first, what is virtual volunteerism? In a nutshell, it is volunteering online. It is nonprofit organizations and governmental entities using the internet to enable volunteers to provide a wide variety of services directly to those in need. Both the volunteers and those receiving the help could be on the same streets or anywhere in the world thanks to modern telecommunications technology. We have an outstanding lineup of panelists with extensive experience utilizing online volunteers. Their bios are available on the event's webpage, and I encourage you to check them out. But to start off this event, our agency's leader has volunteered to provide online remarks. I am honored to present to you the chairman of the FCC, Ajit Pai.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Dave. Thank you to each of you who are joining the webinar online. And thanks to the outstanding panel of speakers that we have lined up today. I promise that I'll keep my remarks short so we can hear from those who are far more expert on this issue than me. You know, over the past 9 months, as everybody knows, virtually every aspect of our lives has migrated to the online environment, from working at home to our kids studying at home to our streaming our favorite shows at home. Now, of course, we did some of those things during the pandemic, but we've had to reimagine certain things that we previously thought of as being exclusively in person. And one of those things that I think we might have thought previously was necessary to do in person is volunteering. By leveraging broadband connections, though, today, individuals are now able to donate their time and their dedication and expertise to helping those who might live in the next town or even somewhere around the globe. And as Dave hinted, we've given this phenomenon a name: virtual volunteering. Now, Americans have always been very generous with their time. According to the most recent figures released in 2018, the Corporation for National and Community Service estimated that about 77.4 million Americans in the here in the country volunteered about 6.9 billion with a B hours of time and talent and effort to improve and strengthen their communities. Many nonprofits and civic organizations have come to rely on this workforce of givers to support their mission and to provide vital services to those who are in need. Now, of course, it's not just those organizations or even the recipients of those services who benefit, it's also volunteers themselves. There's been a lot of analysis that shows that volunteers themselves enjoy a number of health benefits when they do these civically minded activities. For example, volunteering helps counteract the effects of stress and anxiety and even anger. Volunteering makes you happy and combats depression. It increases self-confidence, and it gives people a sense of purpose, that they're doing something that's much larger than themselves. The other thing is, and of course, during the COVID-19 pandemic, everyone I think is keenly aware of the value of this. It helps you to build and maintain a sense of connection with others. There have been even studies that suggest that that type of connection helps people live longer over time. And so volunteering is certainly something that we at the FCC encourage as a matter of good citizenship. Now, of course, the current pandemic has had a major impact on the ability of many people to volunteer in 2020. And with coronavirus cases on the rise and colder weather setting in, many organizations that depend on the holiday season where volunteers show up and do the hard work that they do will need to adjust the way they think about volunteering opportunities and service delivery models in order to meet the need while still being consistent with public health guidelines and best practices. And so one way to make volunteering safe is to move that activity online, much like the FCC and many other government agencies have done with their operations in 2020. And I've seen personally over the past 8.5 months that it's not only possible but it's incredibly productive for many people in the virtual environment. And that's something that we want to extend as much as we can. And the good news is that virtual volunteering opportunities there are many of them, and they provide a very appealing way for people to help even when they're at a stay-at-home environment. Now, of course, the pandemic didn't create virtual volunteerism. This is actually an effort that's been gaining momentum over many years. The Smithsonian Museums in Washington, D.C. use digital volunteers to review and transcribe documents in order to make their collections more accessible online. And today we're fortunate to be joined by other trailblazers in this movement. These innovative nonprofits have pioneered ways to enable remote volunteering to help blind and low vision individuals, to provide support to individuals who are in a crisis, to mentor children who might be a world away, and to map the world around them in a way that brings to life something for people who aren't able to be there in person. We're also honored to be joined today by the United Nations volunteers who will add a unique global perspective to this topic. And I'll note that December 5th, just a few days away, that will be the traditional observation of International Volunteer Day by the United Nations. And so we hope that this event, in some small way, contributes to the mission of that day. And the goal that all of us share is to building a more connected community, a more connected world, even in the virtual environment. So now our goals for this event are threefold. First, we want to raise awareness about the many opportunities that there are to volunteer online and while you're at home. And we certainly hope that today's speakers inspire potential virtual volunteers to raise their hand and to step up in that environment. Secondly, we want to share some concrete examples about ways that organizations can make use of remote volunteers to help advance their mission and serve their communities. And finally, we want to create awareness about some of the organizations and the services that are being provided directly to recipients online. These direct services are made possible in many cases by virtual volunteers. And to me, at least, this is a nice capstone to the top priority the FCC has had during my time as chairman, which is closing the digital divide and making sure that every American, regardless of where he or she happens to live or what his or her circumstances might be, has access to the internet and other online technologies. And virtual volunteering, to me at least, is a great example about how broadband, when it's ubiquitous and accessible to everybody, it enables communities to be stronger and families to be safer in the midst of the pandemic. So this effort has my full support. I look forward to hearing from the inspiring panelists to come. And I want to thank Dave and all of the staff at the FCC once again for supporting this effort. It is an incredibly important effort now more than ever, and very excited to see what the benefits of this event will be in the days and weeks and months to come. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Chairman Pai, for your very insightful commentary. And now it is my honor and pleasure to present from the United Nations Volunteers, the Chief of UN System Affairs and the head of the New York office, Ms. Noelle Dreyouche. My apologies.
Thank you very much, Dave, for your introduction and for yours and the FCC commitment to volunteerism. FCC Chairman Mr. Pai, distinguished panel members and their volunteers and participants, it is my great pleasure to be part of this event, and I'm honored to give the keynote remarks here today at this FCC Virtual Volunteerism webinar. Over the last month, as the COVID-19 pandemic has ravaged across the world, volunteers have been at the forefront of medical, community, and societal responses. Headlines in the world's media have paid credit to volunteers for all kinds of work, including helping to provide medical care, to doing shopping for vulnerable neighbors, or calling elderly people living alone. I would like to quote actually the UN Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed, who speaking at the global technical meeting on volunteerism that was organized by UN Volunteers Program in July this year, reminding the global community that, and I quote here, the effort of 1 billion volunteers is an important foundation at a pivotal moment for development to enable us to recover from the COVID pandemic, end quote. Indeed, technology has changed the way we live. technology has also changed the way we volunteer. Today, the internet allows organizations and volunteers to tackle the world's most important issues together without barriers of time and place. And this has become especially relevant in the current COVID-19 pandemic. During such unprecedented times, the COVID-19 crisis has demonstrated that technology can extend volunteering to reach the most vulnerable. Social distancing makes it impossible to carry out certain activities in person. However, virtual volunteering has enabled thousands of volunteers to transition their activities online. Through various initiatives and social media platforms, through organizations, or in their own capacities, volunteers have taken leadership to make their voices heard or empower others. For example, with the aim of flooding digital space with facts amid the COVID-19 pandemic, the United Nations launched the Verified initiative, calling on people around the world to become information volunteers and share UN-verified science-based content to keep their families and communities safe and connected. Through this, so far, the UN has been able to reach over 2.6 billion people through COVID-19 prevention and health messages. At the United Nations Volunteers Program, UNV, we contribute to peace and development through volunteerism worldwide, including through our UNV online volunteering service. UNV online volunteering service allows organizations and volunteers to team up to address sustainable development challenges, from ending poverty, building peace, or advancing gender equality anywhere in the world from any device. In 2019, a total of 13,000 plus online volunteers served virtually worldwide with 33 United Nations partners in support of 183 civil society organizations working on peace and development, of which 58% were female online volunteers. Because addressing COVID-19 needs a large range of support, from technical assistance to public awareness, through UNV, our online volunteers have used confinement and quarantine as opportunities to support government and communities where help is most needed. I'll just give you some examples. In West and Central Africa, online volunteers have supported organizations in Senegal, Nigeria, and Cameroon as social media administrators, graphic designers, researchers, financial proposal writers, project developers, and even as microbiologists. In India, some UN volunteer district youth coordinators in 58 districts in the country ensured the safety of the communities by supporting authorities in the front lines and reaching vulnerable groups to ensure no one was left behind. During the first 2 weeks of March alone, they were able to reach over 700,000 people on site and online. Worldwide, volunteers advocate for better access to basic, reliable healthcare facilities and promote sustainable hygiene and social behaviors that will last beyond the COVID-19 outbreak. Thanks to UNV online volunteering service, neither lockdown nor physical distancing has prevented creativity, solidarity, and collaboration. Instead, the system promotes effective personal and collective achievements. Within a limited time frame, organizations and volunteers have gained maximum benefits. Today, more than 500,000 online volunteers from over 187 countries are available and willing to help organizations worldwide and on their project. They represent more than 111 fields of expertise and have collaborated with civil society, with public institutions and UN entities in 51 countries since the beginning of 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic has provided opportunities where technology has been leveraged for equitable collaboration. This should be expanded to allow greater access to international research opportunities and equitable research collaboration between individuals and institutions across countries and regions to build a truly global theory of volunteering. Dear panelists and participants, every year, indeed, on the 5th of December, the world celebrates International Volunteer Day to promote volunteering, encourage government to support volunteer effort, and recognize volunteer contributions of sustainable development goals at the local, national, and international levels. International Volunteer Day is an international observance that was mandated by the United Nations General Assembly in 1985. Our theme this year for International Volunteer Day is Together We Can Through Volunteering. And I believe this webinar comes at a great time in not only recognizing the rising prevalence of virtual volunteering, but also thanking all the volunteers who have remotely helped and supported in the world response to global COVID-19 pandemic. Particularly in a time where social distancing makes some type of volunteering impossible to complete in person, and as the world tries to recover from COVID-19, I would sincerely like to thank the thousands of volunteers who have transitioned their activities online in continuing to act in solidarity by reaching the most vulnerable and in helping to steer the world into safer, healthier, more sustainable and inclusive path. With this, I would like to end with showing a video of our online volunteering, including how it can be used by organizations in the responses to COVID. Thank you.
I would like to thank Ms. Driouche for her commentary and leadership in the realm of virtual volunteerism, and we very much appreciate their participation and hope to have the video up and running in just a moment. But in the meantime, I would like to introduce the moderator for today's event, the Associate Bureau Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau at the FCC, Mr. Ed Bartholomé.
Thank you for the introduction, Dave, and again, apologies to everyone for the minor technical difficulties that we've experienced with the video. We hope that we can share that with you a little bit later, but for now, we're going to continue with our program. We've got a lot of great speakers and a lot of great information to share, and I want to make sure we have time to get that in today. I join Chairman Pai in welcoming each of you to this webinar on virtual volunteerism, clearly a timely topic as we host today's event in a virtual environment. We have an exciting panel of experts who have joined us today. The program from here out is divided into two parts. First, I'll be introducing each speaker individually. They've graciously provided a video that we hope we'll be able to play to familiarize you with their operations and volunteer work. Then we'll have a short interview to learn more about their individual missions and volunteer opportunities. After we highlight each of our four panelists individually, we'll invite everyone plus Noel from the UN back on screen to participate in a roundtable discussion to focus a little more on how organizations can start virtual volunteer opportunities if that's something that they're interested in pursuing. So let's begin. Imagine being blind or being visually impaired and then having an app on your phone that can connect you to volunteers able to assist you in everyday situations. Our first panelist will be Alexander Hauerslev Jensen, CCO of Be My Eyes. But first, we're going to try to queue up an introductory video on Be My Eyes. Okay, looks like we might need to go without the videos for now. So, and I apologize again. Alexander, if you could turn on your camera and join me on screen, we'll go to the interview portion of the event. So thank you. Great to see you, Alexander.
Nice to see you, Ed. Thanks for having us.
Can you tell us a little bit about what the inspiration was for starting Be My Eyes?
Absolutely. So Be My Eyes is the brainchild of a man called Hans, a fellow Dane. He's visually impaired himself, and he didn't think it was being fully independent that he had to rely on friends and family to get through the day and solve everyday tasks. So a few years ago, he came up with the idea of saying, why don't we make an app that connects me as a blind man and my peers with sighted volunteers who we can just beep in and at a moment notice for everyday tasks. So that was the inspiration for what's now Be My Eyes.
And tell us a little bit about what the app is and how the program works.
Yeah, so Be My Eyes is a free mobile application that connects anyone who is blind, low vision, visually impaired, dyslexic, or anyone who needs visual assistance with a sighted volunteer or company representative for visual assistance. The app is incredibly simple to use. With a click of a button, someone who's blind or low vision can be connected with a volunteer who can provide virtual assistance through live video. The blind person will just point their phone at whatever they need assistance with, and if you signed up as a volunteer, you'll just explain to the blind person what they're seeing. So it's a very, very simple use of technology.
How many users do you guys currently have?
So right now, the app is being used by just around 275,000 blind and low vision individuals around the world. They're being supported by just around 4.5 million volunteers. And that means that we can now support anyone around the world completely for free and completely unlimited. And we currently support just around 150 different countries. So no matter what language you speak, there's always a volunteer ready to assist.
And you mentioned global. So how many countries are you currently operating in?
In just over 150 countries, and we operate in 185 different languages. So it's a huge community, and we really rely on volunteers to be available, because it really means that people can lead their lives more independently, but also have instantaneous support. One number that we're really proud of is that, like, from when someone clicks the button on the mobile app that says call first available volunteer, the call will go out to a bunch of volunteers who speaks the same language. That on average, those calls are responded to within 25 seconds. And that is a huge deal. And because if you look at support networks for people who are blind or low vision, pre-technology, you would have to go to a blindness organization to have your mail read out. You would have to rely on a volunteer to come to your house or go shopping, and that's not being fully independent. And that's not. We don't think that you would have to rely on your friends and family to do these things. So we're really, really grateful that so many people have signed up to support people that they don't know.
Yeah, and 25 seconds, that's incredible. And I'm sure in some instances that speed matters in providing the service that's being requested.
It sure does. It's of course it's powered by strong technology and the huge volunteering community, and the difference between waiting 10 seconds or 2 minutes when you're trying to set the oven so you can make your Thanksgiving turkey so it doesn't go dry, that's a pretty big deal if you have to do that several times a day.
What are some typical, you mentioned turkey monitoring, but what are some other typical tasks that consumers who are blind or visually impaired seek assistance with?
So we do a ton of readout of printed material. So that is everything from a business card to a brochure. It's also a lot of technical support. Is my oven set to the right temperature? Is my air conditioner set to the right temperature? is my modem blinking green or is it blinking orange because I can't connect to the internet? It's describing artworks, sceneries, picking the right outfit before going to work in the morning, and distinguishing between products, like walking down the supermarket aisle, trying to find a can of garbanzo beans is, if you can't see, is a pretty difficult task because all of these cans feel the same. So in here, like when someone can just call in a human who can, in a matter of seconds, support, that's a pretty big deal.
And do you see differences in the types of requests from different countries or regions of the world?
Yeah, so I mean, there's of course, in the developing world where we see infrastructure might not be done in the most accessible way, we do more navigation, but across the board, it's unfortunately, we live in a world that is pretty poorly designed for people with disabilities and also with visual impairments. So the use cases are, in many cases, quite similar. I would say that it is probably easier to be blind or low vision in a country like the US versus a lot of other places. But that doesn't mean that the vast majority of products and services are designed in an inaccessible way.
So you mentioned that it's free and it's unlimited for people who need to make use of the service. How have you been able to maintain that model?
So a few years ago, we realized that volunteers are great for the vast majority of things, like, am I wearing the white t-shirt, am I wearing the gray t-shirt? But sometimes you need to talk to an expert. So now we work with companies and organizations who are available in the Be My Eyes app. So our users have two options now. They have an option to call the volunteering network of millions of volunteers, but if they have issues with a specific product or service, they go into what we call specialized help, and then they make a live video call directly to customer support organizations. So here we work with Microsoft and Google and Procter & Gamble and other big companies who provide an accessible customer support to the blind and low vision community. This is still a service that's free to the users, and it's something that allows the companies to provide a service that really makes a difference. And there's one really strong example of when this makes sense, and this is with one of our more recent partnerships is with a company called Clear Blue, which is the world's largest pregnancy test and fertility test company. And if you think of a pregnancy test, it's something that's completely inaccessible. You have to see one line or you have to see two lines. And if you can't see, you can't get these very, very private questions answered yourself. You have to rely on someone else. So, and volunteers are not perfect for that either because it's such an important question. So now you can call customer care experts from Clearblue who can help you read out the pregnancy test results. And that's just an example of a company that steps in to provide a service that is completely accessible. So the interplay between volunteers and companies really allows the low vision community to do way more.
How do you recruit and find the people who volunteer with you?
It's a good question, and it's something that everyone asks. To be honest, we don't really do anything. We Be My Eyes, when we launched back in 2015, it was a global birth from day one. We had about 10,000 volunteers signing up within the first 24 hours. And we didn't know if people would sign up to help people that they don't know. And since then, it's just been growing and growing and growing. And the glue of that is really people having such great experiences that they tell their friends about it. Yeah, I think it's such a simple way to make a big difference in another person's life. Sometimes it's a question that takes 30 seconds or a minute, but it's a good reminder of what I think we are all meant to do. We are all meant to, as humans, help each other out. And the barriers to traditional volunteering can be pretty high. You have to drive somewhere, you have to go somewhere, you have to sign up to do something. And one of our users very early on tweeted and said it very nicely. She said, "Be My Eyes is a good deed waiting to happen in your pocket." And I think that is very right. And I think the simplicity is really what has allowed us to grow as we have. We haven't spent any money on marketing or anything like that. It's just people sharing their good experiences. And now that it results in about 10,000 new volunteers every day.
I noticed in some of the information I was looking at about the organization, you use the term micro-volunteering. So how long is the typical interaction? How much time does a volunteer typically devote?
So the average call is just around 3 minutes. Some calls are longer, some are shorter. If someone is just calling up to say, is my air condition set to 71 or 72 degrees, it would take you 5 seconds to see that. So that's an interaction that takes barely any time. But if someone is trying to sort out the record collection, trying to pick out an outfit, for a job interview, that might be something that takes a little longer. But the average is just around 3 minutes.
So one final question. What's next for Be My Eyes? Where do you see it going?
We really want to make sure that anyone who can use it have access to it. So lowering any barriers there is to use of the app. We have done what we can on our end, making it completely free. But of course, also like things like internet, like prices of cellular and all these things are things that create some kind of barrier to using the application. So we want to make sure that Be My Eyes gets into the hands of anyone who can use it. And so that's our main goal, growing the community. And that means both for the blind users, the volunteers, and also the companies who are available in the app.
And I guess I just lied because I have one more thing for you. Since we could video, where can people go to see the video possibly, or get more information about the organization?
Yeah, so if you want to be a part of the community, just go to BeMyEyes.com. In there, you can find all the videos, all the material that you that you need. You can also just go to the App Store, the Play Store, to download the Be My Eyes app. It's completely free. It takes 2 minutes to sign up. Everything is anonymous, so don't worry about your phone number or names or anything like that being shared. And then you can see what it's like to support someone through the app.
Great. Thank you, Alexander. Look forward to you joining us again in a bit for the roundtable part of the discussion. If you could turn your camera off now.
Yeah.
And I'd like to invite Ashley Womble, who is head of public affairs for Crisis Text Line, to turn her camera on and join me on screen. These are truly unprecedented times, and in times of elevated stress, it's so important for consumers to have immediate access to trained crisis counselors. That's why we're so happy to have the Crisis Text Line with us today. Tell us a little bit about how Crisis Text Line got its start. I think you're on mute still.
Well, you just told me to turn my camera on.
That's true.
Thank you so much for introducing, for having us here and for introducing me and Crisis Text Line. So really quick, Crisis Text Line provides 24/7 crisis counseling to anyone. All people have to do is text 741-741 or send us a message using Facebook Messenger. There's no app to download, so we want it to be as easy for people to get in touch with a crisis counselor as it is a friend or anyone you would text. We actually are a spinoff of another organization called Do Something. Do Something engages with its members who are young. It's the largest organization for young people in the United States via text. And Do Something found about seven years ago that they were getting a lot of messages from people, teens who were in crisis and didn't have, wanted to get support via text, but didn't have anyone to text. So Crisis Text Line began as a project to Do Something, and it has been on its own for about 7 years.
Let's talk a little bit about metrics. How many consumers or interactions do you guys have in a month or a year?
Can I answer by day?
Sure.
So yesterday we had 7,000 conversations with texters, which is quite a lot. And conversations, we count a conversation as a full exchange. So we're not talking about individual text messages. We're able to do that because we have a really wide network of crisis counselors who, yesterday we had 1,500 crisis counselors who logged on to help people who are in crisis.
And are you also global in your footprint, or?
We are international. We operate in the United States, and we're also in Canada, the UK, and Ireland. However, one thing that right now we are operating internationally. So if you're in the US, you text the US, and typically your crisis counselor would be in the US, and same for other countries.
What trends are you seeing for the types of outreach that you're getting, the types of issues people are coming to you with, and has that changed any since the pandemic started?
That's such a great question. So the top reasons people text us is when they are depressed, whenever they're having an issue, a relationship issue that might be with their parents, because a lot of our texters, in fact, 50% of our texters are 18 and under. They may be struggling with school. Potentially they are feeling suicidal, or also and they may be having a panic attack or experiencing anxiety. Those are our top 5 issues across the board. What we have seen in COVID is that anxiety, which used to be like the second biggest issue or maybe the third biggest issue, has become the number 1 issue for texters. And that's something that we are still seeing.
How do you think virtual volunteerism fits into the sort of overall societal response to individuals in crisis?
So crisis, one of the things that's really important about crisis is that it is 24/7, right? You can't schedule your crisis between the hours of 9 and 5. And you certainly can't schedule your crisis to happen in a city, right? So for people who need help, they need help where they are, whenever they need help. So virtual volunteering can really fill that gap, because while you might not be able to go someplace at 10 o'clock at night, so I'm a mom, so for me, I'm home, doors locked at 7:30. So if I went PM every night, and of course during COVID, it's it's all the time. But if I want to volunteer, I would have to do it in a really short segment of the day, right? So virtual volunteering allows people to volunteer from their homes, almost always, and are at night. But what also opens up, one of the things that's really important for Crisis Text Line is that in operating 24/7, that doesn't mean that we don't have a steady stream of conversations necessarily all throughout the day. Majority, things are really, really busy for us at night. So if you're in California and it's 7, that's really useful to us here on the East Coast, right? Because that's when people may start texting in and really picking up. Our volume starts to get really hot at night. So that's 2 examples: time frame, and then time zones, and then also there are many more people who can volunteer from their homes than there are who can volunteer in person.
How do you guys train your volunteers?
So it's sort of difficult to become a crisis counselor for Crisis Text Line, and that's on purpose. So the first step when someone wants to become a crisis counselor is they fill out an application, and it's a pretty extensive application, and there's also a background check. So we do require volunteers to be over the age of 18 so that they can take a background check. Then they enter our training program, which is about 40 hours of training. It includes like live simulations with so that people can actually practice those crisis counseling skills that they learn. They also are assigned a coach, which you can think of as sort of like a personal trainer that helps them through their training program, but also once they've graduated from training and are on the platform.
What's the typical profile of a volunteer?
So I think one of the great things about virtual volunteering is that it is the funnel for people who can volunteer virtually is so much wider, right? So people would assume, because most of our texters are young, that our volunteers are young, and that's not necessarily true. We have a lot of volunteers who are over the age of 70. I believe our oldest volunteers or group of volunteers are in their mid to late 80s, right? So that's not a typical profile, but it's not atypical either. And we do have about 10,000 volunteers here in the US. So I would say some profiles there are a lot of people who are already in the helping profession, right? That's one thing that was surprising to us once COVID COVID happened, that we were still getting so many applications from people who were actually working in healthcare who wanted to give back even more. So that's one, a lot of teachers, right? A lot of people who are retired or semi-retired, a lot of expats, because sometimes if you're living abroad, you can't necessarily work for the country you're in. So maybe you want to do volunteering, and that of course helps us out a lot then with time zones. So those are a couple of typical profiles.
And what's the time commitment typically for somebody who's?
So we do ask, so there's training is about 40 hours. Right now, training is, our admissions process is closed. We have a wait list right now for when we open up training in early 2021. And that's because so many people back March, April, and May wanted to become volunteers for Crisis Text Line. So that training is 40 hours. And then we ask the crisis counselors spend an average of 4 hours a week on our platform. We really, and for 1 year, right? So we're hoping to get 200 hours of a time investment from our crisis counselors.
And last question, and I guess I just caught myself again. I'll ask 2 more questions. What's next for Crisis Text Line?
Spanish. So in 2021, we'll be rolling out our service in the United States in Spanish. So that means we're really going to be looking for volunteers who can speak, who are bilingual, for sure, and English and Spanish are potentially, and then eventually Spanish speaking.
And remind us again, what's the number and what's the website to go to find out more information or see videos and learn more?
Yeah, so I encourage everyone to save the number 741-741 in your phone. You never know when you'll need it or someone else will need it. And then if you want to learn more about Crisis Text Line or sign up to get on that wait list to find out when we're accepting new applications, the URL is crisistextline.org.
Great. Thank you so much, Ashley, and I look forward to having you join us again for the roundtable in a little bit. So thank you. And next, I'm going to invite Amy Stokes, who is President and CEO of Infinite Family, to join me on screen and unmute. Your organization and your experience illustrates the global reach of the internet and virtual volunteers, in that it supports South African teens who are benefiting from virtual mentors. There's a great video you shared. If people wanted to go and find that, why don't you tell them off the bat where they can go to see that video, since we can't play it today?
So I went ahead and printed this ahead of time because sometimes it's confusing. It's infinitefamily.org. Thank you, Ed, and thank you to the FCC for pulling this together. It's such an amazing opportunity to sit here and learn about all these other virtual volunteering opportunities. There's such a diversity. I mean, there's something for everyone.
Yep, and we're happy to have you with us. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration and how Infinite Family got its start.
So Infinite Family started when my husband and I adopted our son from South Africa. Now, this was not quite 20 years ago, and video conferences weren't an everyday occurrence. But when we were in South Africa, it was right at the height of the AIDS epidemic. And so a lot of adults the townships just lost the adult population that was supposed to be the role models for a lot of little kids growing up. And we realized when we looked at all of these kids that the kids in the orphanages were really the lucky ones because they had adults around them and helping them. But it was the children in the townships who were growing up in child-headed households. When they'd lose their parents, then the eldest would drop out of school and do their best raising their younger siblings. And I had worked with teens a while ago, even before that in a previous life, and we realized that we had to use technology to find a way to bring adults from around the world into the daily lives of these kids, that they needed role models, but they also just needed someone to validate how important they were and how important their future was. Because if you don't know that it's important to stay in school, to invest in yourself, to get ready for your future because you don't know what that future looks like, then you don't know how to do that. And as soon as you've got more adults around you, their experience, their expertise, then you start to realize that there's a lot to come, and it's exciting, and you start getting ready for it.
So how many children do you guys currently mentor through the program?
So we usually mentor about 150 or 200 a year. We've worked with over 1,000 children total. Some of these mentorships, the average is about 2 years, but some of them last up to 10 years long. So these are really long, deep relationships, and it's so neat to be on a panel with these other volunteer opportunities, because we are probably the other extreme of the micro-volunteering. So on a weekly basis, our volunteers are working with their children about a half an hour a week, about 30 weeks a year. So it's not a huge commitment, but because you're involved with these students over probably the period of their lives where they'll change the most, except for when they're babies, you really get to know these kids, and it becomes a really strong relationship. And it's really that relationship that's the magic to helping the teens make the kinds of decisions and take the actions we want them to make as teens to have the most successful future adulthood.
So it sounds like it's a one-to-one type of experience. So one volunteer to one mentee. About how many people do you have actively volunteering in the program?
So far to date, we've had about 200 at a time. I'm hoping you'll ask me the same question you asked everybody else about what's next at the end, because we have a next. So historically, it has been a one-to-one match. Some of our mentors mentor more than one child at a time. Almost all of our mentors, when they finish with a mentee, when that mentee graduates and moves onto their college studies, they often take another mentee. So we call our mentees Met Buddies. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting some feedback. Go ahead.
I think we need to, Jeff, can you help us mute Ashley's audio? I think is still coming through. There you go. Thank you. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
I was going to say, what trends are you seeing with the people that you're working with? Are the issues that the mentees are facing staying the same over the 10-year period? Do have the conditions changed?
So there's kind of a short answer and a long answer to that. But anybody who's ever been a parent to a teen or even known a teen knows that the main bulk of things that a teen is working through are pretty consistent, generation to generation to generation. It doesn't matter where you're growing up in the world, you're doubting who you are and what you can do, and all sorts of the kind of the division between wanting to be on your own, making your own decisions, and knowing that you might not know what you don't know. So there's kind of those tensions. I think what we have seen, well, and I guess I would say that in South Africa, it's even harder to grow up as a teenager and learn how to become a successful adult in the 21st century world, because they don't have that many role models. The 50 years of apartheid really decimated these communities and isolated everybody growing up in the townships, both from a decent education and from any kind of good job or choice in what they did with the rest of their lives. So the teens growing up in those communities don't have the external influences that teens growing up, say, in the United States might have. So for instance, most of our teens have never heard of any of the jobs in human resources, or what it is to be a microbiologist, or a graphic designer, or any of those kinds of jobs. They just don't even know what's out there in the world. So one of the hardest things, but one of the greatest joys, is exposing our teens to the outside world and all of the opportunities. So that hasn't changed, but I would say that it's different than teens growing up, for instance, in the United States or Europe or some of those other countries. So it's really an access to information and an access to opportunity, and knowing what those opportunities are, and then knowing how to get ready for them. So we don't really see huge changes in what the teens need, but what we do notice is that the teens in South Africa are so hungry to learn from anybody who has built a life in any way, shape, or form in a different world.
So back to the volunteers, how do you find and recruit the people that come and volunteer for your organization?
I'm happy to be able to report, like your other presenters, most of our volunteers find us through word of mouth. So, you know, people will Google virtual volunteering or virtual mentoring, and of course we pop up. But it is a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of sharing our information amongst others. And like Ashley, we also have a waiting list, which is so exciting as we go into 2021.
That is.
We never turn anyone away. We never turn anyone away. We'll get you ready and connect you as soon as we can.
What's the typical profile of somebody who comes and volunteers with you?
Oh, I was hoping you'd ask me. There is no typical profile. So we ask that volunteers be 21 or older. You need to have a little bit of life experience to be really valuable to our teens. But we have had mentors that have done really just about every profession in the world, and have been entrepreneurs and innovators and teachers and kind of really anything. Two of the most fun stories that I have are one of the very first Net Buddies that we had many, many years ago. When we asked him what he wanted to be, he very atypically said, you know, I want to work at NASA. Now, this is a kid in South Africa who wanted to work at NASA. The exciting thing was within 2 years, we had a mentor from NASA that we could connect, and this young man could learn some of the things that he would need to get ready and what he needed to study in school to possibly be able to fulfill his dream. Another young woman was growing up in really the rural area of South Africa, you know, an hour and a half away from anything other than a small village, and had never even seen an airplane up close, right? She'd only seen airplanes going over her small village at 30,000 feet. But she said she wanted to be a pilot. And again, it was really lots of fun because we had several mentors who had spouses or partners who were in the airline industry, including pilots. So we were able to connect and you know, bring that experience and expertise into the life of this child who'd never even seen a plane up close, so she could start building to her dream of being a pilot.
That is exciting. So I'll give you the question you wanted. What's next?
So yes, historically we have been working one-to-one, one mentor to one Net Buddy. But there are so many children that are so eager to learn from our video mentors. Next year, we're going to be breaking it wide open and offering a range of options, one-to-one, one to small groups, which would be 2 or 3 in a very secure, private zone, and then one to many, which could be 1 to 10 or 15, working very specifically on skills development and things getting ready for careers. So what's really exciting for us is all of the different kinds of opportunities we'll be making available to South Africa's teens, and all of the experience we'll be bringing into their lives. And
that does sound exciting and a great way to expand. One more time, what's the website for people who want to find out more?
infinitefamily.org.
Great. Thank you, Amy. And we'll look forward to having you back with us for the roundtable here shortly as well.
Thank you.
So next, we're going to transition to the OpenStreetMap Foundation. I'm very pleased to be joined by Mikael Maron, who is with that organization, and I believe you have a PowerPoint, couple quick slides to give us a little bit of an overview of who you guys are and what you do, and I've been told we can make that work. So fingers crossed, we're going to try that really quick.
Let's give it a shot. I feel like I'm cheating a little bit if I get to have some visuals, but I'm willing to take it if it works out. And thanks a lot for having me. It's a really amazing group to be a part of today.
Okay, looks like they are up.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Mikhail Marin. I'm on the board of the OpenStreetMap Foundation, and I work at a company called Mapbox where I lead the community team. Our website, main website for OpenStreetMap, openstreetmap.org or osm.org. Next slide, please. Essentially, OpenStreetMap is a map of the entire world that anyone can edit and anyone can use. It's built by volunteers. Anyone is willing to who's willing to come up and create map data, and all the data is released openly. It started back over 15 years ago in London by students and software developers who didn't have access to data to create applications, and realized, hey, we have GPS devices. This was in the early days of GPS devices being available. No smartphones yet. We could walk around with our GPS, collect data, convince all of our friends to do the same, and before you know it, we would have enough traces and enough information to create the map ourselves rather than having to purchase it or rely on anyone else. And amazingly, this crazy idea worked incredibly well. Next slide. You're probably, yeah, sorry, here's a screenshot of our website. This actually shows near the FCC headquarters. And next slide will show, you'll see there's an edit button up in the upper left. This slide shows our editor, our web-based editor. So all of the data that underlies that map is editable, and anyone can come and contribute and volunteer to create the map. And as you can see, it's incredibly detailed, not only the road network, but points of interest, land use, water features, anything that's important in the environment around us. Next slide. Now, you may not have heard of OpenStreetMap, but it's likely that you already have many apps in your pocket on your phone that already use OpenStreetMap. We're essentially global infrastructure at this point. Certainly the largest open map database around, in one of 2 or 3 global map databases. And where it gets really interesting is that everyone from largest organizations in the world to individual hobbyist builders make use of OSM. Next slide. So that includes folks like Apple Maps, many other big map providers. The US government makes use of OpenStreetMap in many ways. On the upper right, that's a picture of the National Park Service's NP maps. Researchers make use of OpenStreetMap as a global resource. The University of Chicago used it to identify slums and informal settlements around the world. And OpenStreetMap is used by humanitarian organizations in pretty much every major disaster response through humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. There's efforts underway right now all around the world to map places where geographic data can literally help save lives. Next slide. So we're made up of tens of thousands of volunteers, and some of those volunteers contribute maybe a few points around where they live in their neighborhood. Others get really into it and addicted, and will create a lot of map data, both where they live and around the world. So there's a few who contribute a lot who contribute a little, and it goes beyond just editing and the map, the platform, all of our code. There's a lot of volunteer open source software developers. We hold a lot of events, both lately mostly virtual, but it's really key to meet in person when you can and get out into the world. And all of our governance, I'm on the board, we're entirely volunteer. A lot of our working groups, pretty much all volunteers at OpenStreetMap. Next slide. So these are just some charts of growth over time. We're at about, I'd say 50,000 people every month contribute data to OpenStreetMap. And since the start of the project in 2004, over 1.5 million people have contributed to our global map database. Next slide. And here's just pictures of a variety of ways that people come together and volunteer and contribute to OSM, from following a typhoon in the Philippines, and printing out huge maps derived from OpenStreetMap for responders who are going out into the field, to a hack weekend, a bunch of developers who got together in Bangalore to contribute to open source software that runs OpenStreetMap. And we get together at conferences, lately virtually, but hopefully again in person someday soon. That's a picture of the first State of the Map Africa conference a couple years ago in Kampala, Uganda. Next slide. So the foundation itself, we look after the core platform, the technical platform. We hold the IP and hold the license to the data. And we try to act as a coordinating point for the global community. Next slide. That happens largely through local chapters. So we, as a global foundation, we don't try to engage volunteers directly ourselves. A lot of that happens through local communities and through official local chapters who put on events, run different kinds of volunteering drives, and connect with governments and stakeholders in different countries to make sure that OpenStreetMap is useful there. Next slide. And that includes here in the US, there's a local chapter, OpenStreetMap US. That's basically the domain as well, openstreetmap.us. You can learn more about the local chapter there. And if you wanted to see video, we have a video. Go to Twitter and just OpenStreetMap US, all one word. It's a pinned tweet at the top. You can see a video that shows a little bit more about the project. I think that's the end of the slides. That's an old link.
Great. Thank you for providing us with that overview, and obviously being a map focused company, I think the visuals were helpful and kind of convey the story. How many volunteers have you had assist you with the project so far, on estimate?
Since the start, about 1.5 million people have ever contributed to the database. That's as far as we can tell. And as I said, there's lots of other ways, but on a monthly basis, it's about 50,000 people who contribute map data all around the world.
And is there a training curve to this, or is it pretty like you can hop on and just start adding information?
Yeah, both of those things. It's pretty easy to get started and to do some simple things. If you say opened up OpenStreetMap, went to your hometown, click edit, it will open. You have to register for an account. It'll open the editor, and it will take you through a simple walkthrough that gives a brief explanation of how you do the basics of editing. But of course, you can go a whole lot deeper, and some of the techniques and some of the map data, it can get pretty complicated. Some of the intricacies of mapping how rail networks are connected, or the road network, or big land masses. So it can go pretty deep, but it's also pretty easy to get started just by the online training.
And I'll ask, is there a typical profile of a volunteer, or?
Yeah, it really varies from place to place. I mean, I think there's a definitely attract a technical crowd, people who are interested in data and who have data needs or are interested in contributing to data that gets put to use in new ways. A lot of students, there's student programs to engage in mapping activities, particularly some of the humanitarian mapping activities through Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. That program is called Youth Mappers, and there's chapters at colleges across the world, including in the US, but in many other places as well. There's a lot of companies that are involved as well, and so sometimes there are people who are contributing to OSM, but it's part of their work. So it runs the gamut. But I would say, like, if you're into data, if you're into understanding the world around you and want to explore and contribute something, then OpenStreetMap's a really great fit.
So what's next?
Well, part of what's exciting is that I don't know. We're such a big dispersed global community that it's always full of surprises for us. For the foundation, we're focused on one kind of building more sustainable infrastructure. The project's growing really fast, and so we need to make sure that our technical infrastructure keeps up with that. And we're also, we've been focusing on bringing on more local chapters. We most recently brought on our first chapter in Sub-Saharan Africa, OpenStreetMap DRC. We want to encourage the project to grow and people to get involved all around the world. So I think there's going to be a lot of efforts at helping us set up new local chapters. And
domestically, it's OpenStreetMap US, right?
OpenStreetMap US, and you'll find wherever you are in the US, there's probably a local dedicated fanatic group of mappers, and it's a great organization, and also has connections with government, with the federal government, local government, making use of data in lots of different ways.
Great. So thank you, Mikkel, and please stay on camera as I invite everyone from the panel, all of our other panelists, to unmute, turn your camera back on, and we'll transition to the roundtable now. Great. Good to see everyone again. So our goal is to kind of transition a little bit and bring the collective wisdom of everybody back into the conversation to talk a little bit about virtual volunteerism and how entities can start opportunities. What are some best practices? What are lessons learned that you guys have experienced as you've gone along? I'm going to address a question to a person, each one of you specifically, but after that person sort of concludes with their answer, others should feel free to jump in. If you can find the little hand raise icon in Teams, feel free to do that when you have something to say, or if you just want to like shoot your hand up visibly, because I'll definitely catch that, feel free to do that as well. So we'll get started. Noel, thank you for sharing the UN's perspective on virtual volunteerism. Obviously, there's immense focus globally right now on the COVID-19 pandemic. You talked a lot about the way that volunteers have been able to mobilize in response to that. How is it that the UN is able to have such fluid volunteer opportunities, right? So needs are constantly changing. How do you keep that pace and keep that focus so that people can jump in and be where they're needed quickly?
Well, I have to say, it's thanks to the spirit of volunteerism. I mean, you just heard today from the colleagues or from the distinguished panelists here, I mean, the stories about what the power of volunteerism and what it can achieve. So I think, we in the UN, I mean, UNV is the organization on volunteerism. I mean, we do promote volunteerism for the peace and development worldwide. And we also provide the UN system and the government and civil society that are working on the ground with volunteers to help them with the activities. So we started the online volunteering since I just checked it out yesterday. It's since 2000. And it is amazing. And I can just see it that it's going to grow even more. And especially with the technology today and what is enabling us to do. And I think the pandemic, again, has shown the power of the online volunteering. This is together with the on-site volunteering. I mean, there are also thousands, there is 1 billion of people out there who are also volunteering on-site. So for me, I think it is that spirit, people want to give back. We heard from the chairman at the beginning who said about the well-being, the power of it. These are committed, and this is what brings, and I think this is what's going to continue bringing the volunteerism, at the forefront of whatever we do as a society, whether we talk about development or we talk about peace or we talk about achieving, the Sustainable Development Goals. So yeah, thanks.
I know a big draw for many volunteers is often the camaraderie they feel with their fellow volunteers. Beyond the sense of mission, volunteer units can sometimes develop a sense of family. And Ashley, I know your volunteers engage in some high stress interactions at times, and having a system to support them in place, it can be very important. So have you found it successful to replicate that sort of sense of community in a virtual space?
Thank you for that great question. So one of the things that that we're able to do at Crisis Text Line due to our platform, and I would imagine many organizations are, once you bring people online, you may be online, you may be alone when you're volunteering, right, from your home or wherever you are. But once you log on to the Crisis Text Line platform for one of your shifts, you're certainly not alone. So there's a number of ways where we invoke community on our platform between crisis counselors and Crisis Text Line staff. So whenever one of the ways is and I work as a crisis counselor, volunteer as a crisis counselor in addition to my role at Crisis Text Line. And so when I log on, I say hello to my supervisor. If I work consistently with kind of the same shifts, then I will have the same supervisor, and we'll start to see the same names along on our. We have it. If you've ever used AOL Instant Messenger, which many people have, but although it's not something people use anymore, you may remember whenever you see that your friends are online, right? Their names pop up as kind of your favorites, and we have a lot of the those features like group chat. We have for our crisis counselors. It's always going on, and there's a couple of different groups, right? There's just the random, right, conversations that people are having, like what are you snacking on, right? Or more importantly, I just had a really hard conversation I need to debrief. Or another group chat that we always do is advice, right? So if you're working with a texter and you maybe aren't sure how to handle a conversation, you can ask the group, and many people will chime on. And there's usually, as I mentioned, we have well over 1,000 counselors online every day, so there's usually a couple hundred and many more than that at night who are online. And then we have that all happens when you're on the network, and then we also have a kind of our own social network for crisis counselors. So they spend a lot of time there, and we've even had one proposal that I know of. So people have actually become family by the extent of their volunteering at Crisis Text Line.
Well, I was going to ask about volunteer retention, and I think a proposal is an incredibly effective tool. Do others have tips they can share for volunteer retention in remote engagements and opportunities?
One of the things that we found that is really important is the ongoing support for the volunteers throughout the relationship. I like what Ashley's saying, where there's people engaged right all the time. We have an on-call staff all the time also that our volunteers can talk to, again, with stressful situations or tech problems or whatever. But for having the volunteers both know there's always somebody there and that there's ongoing challenges that they get to be part of solving or making better, which is a rewarding feeling. That seems to be really important in our organization.
And Amy, when you were doing the one-on-one, you talked a lot about how the draw for some of the young people is the sort of connection to the larger world, but that's made possible through technology. Obviously, we're all leveraging technology platforms and tools to make this work. You shared in an email about, an interesting wrinkle can sometimes be technical difficulties. So do virtual volunteers need to have a little more patience, a little more tech savvy to make things work?
I don't think I need to answer. Everybody's head went up and down. So what we find is really the impetus of needing a little, I wouldn't say tech savvy, because I think we're all learning together. Certainly we are in our organization. But what we find is, you can log into any website using a whole menu of browsers. You can be using an iOS system or a Linux system or a Microsoft operating system. But the interaction between the browser, the operating system, the application, whatever your ISP is doing that day, if one of any of those levels upgrades, it sends kind of ripples down through everything else. All of a sudden, something that worked a week ago beautifully won't work at all. And so, and sometimes, you know, the tech companies don't put out feeder notes that say, oh, we're going to do this and it might affect all the rest of you. Nobody tells you that. So sometimes the first warning you have is when a volunteer will reach out and say, what am I doing wrong? It doesn't work today, and they might not be doing anything wrong. But they do need to, we find that it helps if we tell them up front at the very beginning, you know, this is a tech thing and you're used to everything working in your world because you can control it. But now you're working in a lot of other worlds at the same time, and we can't control all of those. So, so some mentors just want to have it fixed, and some mentors really do enjoy being part of the solution. But it is something we have to be aware of. I mean, how many times do you log in at the last minute to do something and the app pops up and says, oh no, you've got to change your password. Or, oh no, you've got to upgrade, please download, you know, and you just have to build in kind of the flexibility to accept that as your world right now.
And Ashley, you wanted to jump in?
Yeah, so I love what Amy said about we're all learning together, and what sparked for me, and we actually teach as part of our training how to use our platform, right? So we don't expect that crisis counselors, volunteers come to us knowing how to use our platform at all. I mean, we built it, so we have to train them. And because we kind of start off at that place where we don't expect for you to know how this is going to work, it allows us to really build, and that eliminates a lot of the problems. And certainly we can't know whenever people are going to have internet issues, but we do help in the beginning, and that reduces a lot of the stress.
And I know Alexander and Mikhail, you guys both have very public-facing platforms. So, you know, it's an app you can download, it's a website you can visit. Can you talk a little bit about hurdles that you've maybe encountered launching those public-facing portals?
Yeah, I can start on that. When we launched, as I said in the beginning, we had no idea if people would would blind and low vision individuals use the can we convince volunteers to actually sign up and support people that they don't know? We had no idea, so we were terrified that no one would sign up to volunteer. We were like, hey mom, would you mind just signing up as a volunteer just in case? But as I mentioned, within the first 24 hours, more than 10,000 volunteers signed up, and that in itself created quite a few challenges, both on the technical front, making sure that how on earth are we going to connect all these people in an instance. Our plan when we launched was like, okay, we're going to start it in Denmark, and maybe in 3 months' time, let's see if we can go to Sweden. But everything happened I think we were operating in 30 different countries and 30 different languages within the first 24 hours. So with translations, for example, we spoke 2 languages on the team. Like how on earth are we going to support this? But then we found ways to utilize the volunteering community. So now we actually use volunteers to translate the app. We have about 10,000 volunteers who, on top of just being visual assistants, also help translate the app. So when we release a new version and there's a new, it could be a new button that has some kind of writing on it, we send it out to all of our volunteers, and I translate it from English into Danish. You translate it from English into German, and you into Spanish and French and whatnot. And that allows you to constantly whip out new updates and make sure that it's in a language that everyone understands. So these failure of success or scale was something that we were faced with from day one, actually.
Yeah, and I can build on that. The challenge of going from something that works in one place and one country and one cultural context, and then something that explodes onto a global stage. It tests all of the assumptions you had about how your platform works, about how people are going to interact with it, about the culture of volunteering in that place. That's been for me personally, one of the things which has been so just illuminating. I've spent a lot of time working in Kenya, and it looks very different to volunteer in a place where you may also have a struggle to make ends meet day to day, but people also want to contribute. It just has to look different. So as OpenStreetMap has grown and gone to different places, there's been a lot of learning about not only like how do you specify what a road is in rural Kenya versus in the middle of London, but especially how people communicate online. Like I said, we're a global project, and even if you all speak English, the way that I'm sure the UN has a lot of experience with this. There's just a lot of assumptions which go into our communication, and we miscommunicate all the time. I will say that within OpenStreetMap, and that just means we're constantly on our toes and learning about how we can connect to others. And on the flip side, it's amazing that we get to connect with others through what we do and learn so much about other places and other people, and really build rich relationships with people on the other side of the world and around the corner.
So I noticed that. Go ahead, Noah.
No, I just want to chip in here and maybe also answer a question that you had asked a bit earlier. Because it's true. I mean, we can communicate. We communicate differently, and we do things differently. And there are issues with platforms. And yes, indeed, we are all learning together on this. But there is one thing that I would like that we all do, and organizations who are working with online volunteering to do. Which is to really acknowledge the contributions of the volunteers when they are working for you. If they are doing a design or doing something, I mean, I think it is really beneficial to mention their names and acknowledge that. I also think that providing feedback to them, this is something that we do at UNV. We ask the organizations that are working with us to provide feedback to the volunteer when he or she finishes the assignment. We also do provide, and for the volunteer to also provide his or her feedback to the organization over the assignment that they have had. And we do also issue certificate to recognize their contribution. So I think these are things that we can do in order to keep the spirit of the volunteerism and to really thank the volunteers, especially that we are coming now to the International Day of Volunteers. So I just want to highlight that one. Thank you.
And we're coming up on time. I'm going to kind of do a quick lightning round and just ask if you have one additional piece of advice for either an organization looking to create a mission-focused virtual volunteer opportunity, or for someone who wants to find a virtual volunteer opportunity, what would the advice be? And I'll start with Mikkel, because you're kind of in my top corner on my screen.
Sure. I think opening up the opportunity to your volunteers to create with you and to figure out what you're doing together is really an amazing way to build something, to build a platform. It takes some humility, because you have to admit you don't know everything, but the results can be. Of course, you don't know everything. The results, if you can find a way of gathering together and figuring out things together, are pretty amazing. And it creates more dedicated volunteers if they really have a stake, not just in what they do, but how they do it.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley?
I think in terms of engagement, something that we do in addition to creating a community and teaching people who want to become crisis counselors life skills that, quite frankly, I use every day, the conversation skills that I learned to become a crisis counselor. We've also gamified our program a little bit. So it's not a game, but we do, based on the number of conversations people take, they are on a certain level, and what people do want to work up the ladder, right? So that they can unlock different perks, as you might a video game. And that's worked really well for us. I know I'm personally very proud that I'm a level 4, but I can't wait to become a level 5. And that means spending more time myself volunteering for the organization.
Amy?
I think one of the things I would one of the things that we found about our deep relationship building volunteering is that often you don't know what you have to offer, and it's often not what you think it is that the other person needs. So for instance, one of the most enlightening moments for our teens is when they hear that their adult mentor struggled with anything in their life, right? These kids are growing up in the worst circumstances and they think they're the only ones who haven't been able to figure out how to be successful. So when they find out that someone else has had similar challenges and gotten through it or overcome it or figured out how to go around it, it gives them strength to do it themselves. And they start realizing that, hey, if they can do it, I can do it too. But that's not what our mentors log on thinking they have to offer, right? They think they're going to teach business skills or some kind of high learned trained thing. But really, it's about how you as a person became the strong, successful person you are. So, video mentors just have to realize that they're giving something all the time, even if they don't think they are.
Thank you. Alexander?
Yeah, I think two pieces of advice. One is very much aligned with what Mikhail said, that make sure to design with the people that you're designing for, making sure that they're really a part of the journey from the very, very beginning. The second part, which I think has been part of our growth, is making sure that it's dead simple to be involved. I think traditional volunteering is there's too many barriers that we need to get through to actually go and do some good. So making sure that you reduce any friction that it might take, making it very, very simple for people to be involved. And I would say that has been key for us, and that's something I would recommend anyone who's entering this field to remember.
Thank you. Noelle?
From my side, I will give two, one for the volunteers and one for the organizations. And I am giving it from my perspective. I mean, working for the UN. So for the volunteers, I will say to be patient and to continue, applying for opportunities, not to give up, even if there is like a closure of something, as there is a waiting list. Just continue looking for opportunities. And for the organizations, I will say, please put yourselves in the online volunteer when you are putting together an opportunity, that it is clear and it is straightforward. So those are the two from my side. Thank you.
Great. And thank you all for being with us today and being so generous with your time today and sharing your time, expertise, and wisdom. We've certainly enjoyed having you on today's webinar. I'm going to ask everybody to turn off their cameras and mute, and I'm going to turn the event back over to Dave.
Thank you very much. And at this point, I would like to introduce the Chief of the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, Mr. Patrick Weber.
Well, thank you very much, Dave. I appreciate the introduction and certainly the work that you've done as project manager for this event. I also want to thank the rest of the outreach team and especially all of our presenters who've contributed to making today's event a real success. We learned some really good things today from our presenters, our panelists. Important information that I think we can all take back and use in the future if we're interested in doing virtual volunteerism. So as we've heard this afternoon, broadband connectivity makes virtual volunteerism possible. For Be My Eyes, it has allowed them to crowdsource 4 million volunteers in 150 countries around the world. For Crisis Text Line, it provides the platforms needed to host over 4 million chats, with 7,000 conversations held just yesterday. For Infinite Families, it makes personal connections possible, and they've connected volunteers with over 1,000 children to mentor them as they grow. And for OpenStreetMap, it connects local knowledge to a global mapping effort with about 1.5 million contributors worldwide. As you've seen today, the great thing about virtual volunteerism is that interested consumers can lend a hand to others who are around the corner or around the world. And consumers can customize their experiences, engaging with causes that resonate with them individually and pitching in on their own schedules. The global COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the lives of people everywhere, amplifying the need for support.
Many of us are working or going to school from home and limiting our trips out. And in this new normal, as you've heard today, virtual volunteerism can be a great way for us to give back, to contribute to our communities, and to stay connected. Today, we introduced you to some innovative organizations that have found ways to create virtual volunteerism opportunities that support their mission. There are many others out there, and I'm confident we can all find a cause, in addition to those we've seen today, that provides online volunteer activities that align with our interests. Our guests today also shared some great advice on how to develop, utilize, and retain online volunteers. Their experiences can serve as a guidepost to other organizations looking to start online volunteer programs or to transition current in-person opportunities to virtual volunteerism. Yesterday, the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, has come to be known as Giving Tuesday in the United States. And while financial donations and support are incredibly important to nonprofit organizations, many also rely on volunteers and donations of time and talent to fulfill their missions. As we look ahead to the United Nations International Volunteer Day, this Saturday, December 5th, and the arrival of the holiday season, I can think of no better time or way to contribute to the well-being of others. To learn more about each of today's presenters and the organizations they represent, please visit the event page for today's webinar at fcc.gov/events. And I'll put in a plug for an upcoming webinar that CAOD is hosting, the FCC, and it's entitled Avoiding COVID-19 Scams. We're going to hold that on Wednesday, December 16th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and look for more information to be posted soon on fcc.gov/events. This concludes today's program. Thank you again for joining us. On behalf of everyone at the FCC, have a warm and joyful holiday season, and may 2021 bring you happiness, prosperity, and good health.
Hello everyone. As we join millions of people staying home worldwide to stay safe, many of us are thinking of ways to make good use of our time, and namely ways of helping those at the front lines facing the pandemic. This is a time when online volunteering proves its unique utility, as it enables more people to contribute to facing global challenges from anywhere in the world using the technology at their fingertips, smartphones, tablets, or computers. Today, I'm inviting you to join UNV online volunteering platform, which puts UN entities, governmental institutions, and non-governmental organizations worldwide into contact with volunteers to work together for peace and development. The United Nations Volunteers Program provides you with flexible, free of charge, online volunteer capacity to support rapid COVID-19 responses. The platform's use is easy as 1, 2, 3 steps. Register your organization or join an existing account. Publish volunteer opportunities which attract the people you need. Select and manage the best online volunteers from anywhere in the world. When you sign up, you will be able to connect with more than 500,000 registered online volunteers who are motivated and eager to support you on task-based assignments to contribute to the fight against the coronavirus. Several online volunteers from around the world have already started working as an online team to support the World Health Organization, UNHCR, UNDP, and other first responders across the UN system by contributing to its COVID-19 preparedness, response, and long-term recovery efforts. If you are in a need for a statistician, translator, designer, writer, counselor, epidemiologist, or other occupational group, now is your chance. Visit onlinevolunteering.org and get started. Stay safe, stay connected.
You might wonder how blind people deal with everyday challenges. Well, normally the answer is simple. We're not that different from you. We play music. We go to school. We go to work. You get the picture. But sometimes the simplest things can be difficult, and we need a pair of eyes.
Connect to
first available helper.
That's where you come in.
establishing video connection.
Through your smartphone, Be My Eyes connects the blind with sighted people through a live video connection. Simply choose if you need help or want to help by the click of a button.
That's a nice picture of you and your family, Caroline. Is it for a present? Yes, it's a photo from my parents.
You can help just by installing the Be My Eyes app,
Print image.
and we'll notify you when someone needs your help. And if you're in the middle of something, don't worry. Someone else will step in.
That dog is way too old.
So, would you care to be my eyes?
To see ourselves in each other, to find compassion and understanding and gratitude and grace. People need empathy. Families need empathy. Communities need empathy. At Crisis Text Line, we're powered by 10,000 people who are ready to show you empathy whenever you're feeling alone, who are there to see you and hear you and validate you and remind you that the world needs you.
In 2002, my mom passed away at 7. My sister was the one who was raising us. She had to quit school in order for her to be able to get an income so that she can support us, but she was 19.
I live at Alexandra with my siblings, 5 siblings, with my mom. My dad is still alive, but I don't live with my dad. When you tell a parent about your school, she'll say to you, don't tell me about school, don't tell me about that. That thing won't help you. What they're doing to their children, it's not good.
I just wanted to die. I never wanted to be in this world. But talking to my mentor, she showed me that it's not worth it, and we dealt through it together.
Because of my background, I used to just hold it with me. It never used to be something that I could just brush off easily. But having her, yeah, that actually at least helped me to move on.
I had an English teacher that telling me that I'm a nobody, I'm not gonna make it in life, I'm a fool. But then I talked to my mentor about it, and I just look at him and think, oh, if that's what you think, then so be it. But I know what I'm gonna do in life, I know what I'm gonna be.
Because she's a happy person, she just made me to learn how to, have that sense of humor, to be a people's person and not only be all grumpy me.
But my mentor has done a great job with that. She's helped me, find myself, know who I am really.
They give you, they inspire you, they motivate you, they give you what is that you need to do so that you become a success.
I had someone to keep me going in life, someone to remind me where I'm going in life, someone to remind me that I can be someone in life, I can do whatever I want to do with my life. So it was very important for me.
She's more like she's more than a mentor to me. She's a mother basically, because she's got kids my age, and we've got like a lot of things in common. She loves sports, she loves working out. We talk about everything. I'm comfortable with her.
OpenStreetMap is a volunteer-run, contribution-driven project that we all work on.
OpenStreetMap is the most insanely successful project for massive geodata collaboration.
It's undergone incredible growth since it first launched in 2004. The data's quality is high enough that corporations like Microsoft have integrated it into their core products.
It's called OpenStreetMap. It's kind of like Wikipedia for maps.
We are curating the only publicly available worldwide geospatial database, and at the same time, doing a lot of innovative, creative, and important things with that data.
The need to have more elastic and available and open geospatial data is more imperative now than ever.
OSM is data, but it's also great software.
I'm an OSM contributor and I have been for over 7 years. Let's talk about making OSM's rail better in the USA to grow our community.
How do you find a trail that fits your needs? OSM actually has thousands of trails available to us. They're right there at our fingertips.
It's become clear to me that OpenStreetMap has a vital role to play and something I'm really passionate about, which is getting people outside.
There are 54.5 million people in this country alone who would benefit from better sidewalk data. Well, our team thinks that OpenStreetMap is uniquely placed to deliver this.
It was the first time on a large scale the OpenStreetMap community had come together to do mapping in this way to respond to a disaster.
OSM really documents the world around us. It documents our lives, our cultures, infrastructure, things like buildings, theaters.
OpenStreetMap US was founded to facilitate the State of the Map US. We want to have programs, hold events, help build tools, and provide support and direction for people new to the map.
It's really about building community.
The point of this is not just to grow the map, but to also grow the mappers, who will in turn grow the map.
Everybody deserves to be on the map, whether or not they're in a position to put themselves on the map today.
And I think connecting all those dots can really lead to a richer map for everybody.
We're part of a powerful open movement. It's what brings my skills and your skills together and allows us to leave the table with something that is greater than the sum of our parts.
As the largest publicly available worldwide database, I think we need to be training the next group of mappers to follow in our footsteps.
It's an exciting time to be part of OpenStreetMap, and there's so much for us to do. I invite all of you to tell some about OpenStreetMap. Join a new committee, meet up with other mappers in your town, run for the board, teach someone new to map.
I want to challenge each of us to consider how we can further adapt and innovate tools so that the maps we make can help shape the future we want to see.